Hello and welcome. In this video, you will learn what the ketogenic way of eating is, what benefits it will give you, what challenges you may face, and what foods to eat and avoid. In this video, I'm going to answer all these questions. So please keep watching to discover everything to know about this magic formula in this video, but before we start, please like this video and subscribe to the channel if you are new here. This little action really supports us so much and motivates us to produce more and helpful contents for you. Would you like to know exactly what you should eat to lose weight without giving up your favorite food or starving yourself? And you make sure that the keto diet is right for you or not, so click on the link in the description and consult our support to get a customized plan for your keto diet. And get the deliciously easy keto recipes book as a gift. And now let's see the rest of the video. 1. An introduction to the ketogenic diet. Ketogenic diets have started to increase in popularity as doctors and researchers investigate the potential benefits. Nutritional ketosis, the aspirational endpoint of ketogenic diets, is achieved by restricting carbohydrate intake, moderating protein consumption, and increasing the number of calories obtained from fat. Theoretically, this restriction of carbohydrates causes the body to switch from glucose metabolism as a primary means of energy production. This results in the use of ketone bodies from fat metabolism, a metabolic state where the body prefers to utilize fat as its primary fuel source. Recent studies utilizing low-carbohydrate, high-fat, LCHF, diets, such as the ketogenic diet, show promise in helping patients lose weight, reverse the signs of metabolic syndrome, reduce or eliminate insulin requirements for type 2 diabetics, reduce inflammation, improve epigenetic profiles, alter the microbiome, improve lipid profiles, supplement cancer treatments, and potentially increase longevity and brain function. The number of Americans suffering from obesity, diabetes, and metabolic syndrome is on the rise. The markers of metabolic syndrome include an increase in abdominal adiposity, insulin resistance, elevated triglycerides, and hypertension. All of these negative health markers increase the risk of cardiovascular disease, diabetes, stroke, and Alzheimer's disease. According to WebMD, there are currently 27 million people with type 2 diabetes and 86 million with prediabetes. In addition, the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, also estimates that almost 40% of adults and around 20% of American children are obese. Many researchers believe these diseases are a result of carbohydrate intolerance and insulin resistance. Thus, a diet that reduces the exposure to carbohydrates, including whole grains, might become a more logical recommendation for improving health. In line with this, two dietary regimens, the standard ketogenic diet and the therapeutic ketogenic diet, which restrict carbohydrate consumption to varying degrees, are being studied for their health impacts. The therapeutic ketogenic diet, which severely restricts both carbohydrates and protein, is typically used in the treatment of epilepsy and cancer. However, the dietary guidelines for Americans suggests that between 45 and 65% of caloric intake should come from carbohydrates. If a person consumed 2,000 calories per day, that would equate to an average of 225 to 325 grams of carbohydrates each day. 2. The effect of the ketogenic diet on the microbiome. The microbiome consists of trillions of microscopic organisms in the human gastrointestinal tract. It comprises over 8,000 different types of bacteria, viruses, and fungi living in a complex ecosystem. Recent research suggests that the genetic makeup of a microbiome can be affected by lifestyle factors which include, but are not limited to, sleep, exercise, antibiotic use, and even diet. These bacteria can alter our response to different food sources because they differ in their ability to harvest energy from food, affecting the postprandial glucose response, PPGR. Since the controlling of glucose levels in the blood seems to reduce the risk of metabolic disease, diabetes, and obesity, this might be an innovative way to help reduce disease risk. A study conducted at the Weizmann Institute demonstrated that a mathematical algorithm could be used to determine an individual's microbiome profile and predict their glycemic response to different types of foods. Thus, the patients were able to change from stable blood glucose to unstable levels by simply eating the foods that the program predicted as good or bad based on their microbiome. Their initial results were confirmed by a repeat study at the Mayo Clinic with a different population. It is important to note that the composition of the microbiome, which is believed to have a fundamental role in human health, is shaped predominantly by environmental factors. The average heritability of the gut microbiome taxa is only 1.9%, while over 20% of variability was associated with diet and lifestyle. Thus, research into the complex interactions that exist between diet, the microbiome, and host metabolic rates have increased. A study exploring the benefits of prebiotic foods, such as inulin and oligosaccharides, observed an increase in the number of bifidobacteria in the colon and the presence of other critical butyrate-producing bacteria. Another study determined that the diversity of the gut microbiota was influenced more by a westernized diet than by the body mass index of the subjects. The patients who followed the westernized diet showed an increase in firmicutes and a decrease in bacteroidetes in their microbiome, which are negative changes. A review article also reported positive changes in the gut microbiome and overall health in energy-restrictive diets or diets rich in fiber and vegetables. Thus, people eating processed and bland food had reduced diversity of their microbiota, while people eating a diet rich in fruit and vegetables had increased diversity in their gut microbiota. Moreover, gut biomes that lacked genetic diversity were related to overall adiposity, insulin resistance, dyslipidemia, and an inflammatory phenotype. 3. The effect of the ketogenic diet on the epigenome. Epigenetics refers specifically to changes on top of the genome that can modify and alter levels of gene expression. These epigenetic markers are heritable, yet recent research suggests that some changes can be reversed or occur through environmental changes. The modifications of the genome involve DNA methylation, changes to chromatin structure, histone modification, and non-coding RNAs. Most notable are histone modifications. For example, the N-terminal of histone tails can be acetylated, methylated, phosphorylated, ubiquitinated, or SUMylated. Histone deacetylases, HDAC, are enzymes that can remove acetyl groups and condense the chromatin. Similarly, sirtuins, SIRT, are also capable of deacetylating histones. Histone lysine methylation can either activate or repress a gene's activity based on the exact location and number of methyl groups added to the histone tail. Research has found that most epigenetic modification occur during early embryogenesis, but the genome can acquire changes later in life. Some of the later epigenetic modifications are caused or modified because of diet. Some ketogenic food sources that positively regulate epigenetic activity are cruciferous vegetables, dietary fiber, foods rich in long-chain fatty acids, and berries, such as raspberries. The benefits of some of these food sources have a multitude of positive effects. For instance, black raspberries not only positively affect methylation patterns in the WNT signaling pathway, but they also profoundly impact the microbiome makeup, increased lactobacillus, Bacteroideaceae, and anti-inflammatory bacterial species, and increased production of butyrate by fermentation in the gut. Thus, it appears that diets rich in certain foods can positively modify genes that increase overall cell health. 4. The effect of the ketogenic diet on weight loss. According to recent Harvard models, 50% of the children today are likely to be obese by the age of 35 years. As scientists try to determine the most effective strategies to combat the obesity epidemic, many studies have emerged that compare the health outcomes of different diets. A recent meta-analysis of 7 random-controlled trials using diazoxide or octreotide for suppressing insulin secretion in obese patients found that it led to reduced body weight, fat mass, while maintaining lean mass. However, the cost of artificially reducing insulin levels was an increase in blood glucose levels. While these studies seem promising as an indicator of biomarkers that can stimulate weight loss, it seems more logical to help patients achieve lower insulin levels via changes to their diet. The reduction of carbohydrate intake naturally reduces blood glucose levels, thus reducing insulin as a result. Many studies have now demonstrated that the ketogenic diet reduces both blood glucose and insulin levels. A study conducted by Fumagalli et al. Analyzed the genetic profiles of patients and looked at the impacts on metabolism. They specifically looked at human CHC22 clathrin, which plays a central role in intracellular traffic of insulin-responsive glucose transporter 4, GLUT4. The GLUT4 pathway is the dominant mechanism used by humans to remove glucose from the circulating blood after a meal. They found two major gene variants, one which is more frequent in farming populations than in hunter-gatherers. Hunter-gatherers have the gene that allows GLUT4 to be sequestered more effectively and thus have an inherent increased risk of insulin resistance. It is hypothesized that as humans became farmers and increased glucose in the diet, it was beneficial for the blood sugar to be lowered more easily with the newer form of CHC22. Thus, people with different forms of CHC22 are likely to differ in their ability to clear blood sugar after a meal. The people with the form that allows blood sugar levels to remain elevated could eventually lead to diabetes in the face of a high carbohydrate load in the diet. This new finding might explain why some patients are successful on a high carbohydrate, low-fat diet, while others prefer to maintain weight with a low-carbohydrate, high-fat diet. 5. The effect of the ketogenic diet on diabetes. According to the latest CDC report, an estimated 30 million people have diabetes and around 84 million have prediabetes. That statistic predicts that 45% of Americans are either diabetic or pre-diabetic. Diabetes is a major health concern that is accompanied by a long list of secondary complications, and diabetics are at increased risk of microvascular pathology of the retina, renal glomerulus, peripheral neuropathy, and atherosclerotic disease affecting arteries. Many of these diabetic complications have been linked to elevated levels of glucose over long periods of time, which is measured as hemoglobin A1c, HbA1c. Type 2 diabetes is caused by hyperinsulinemia, and insulin levels are directly affected by carbohydrate consumption. Protein intake can cause slight increases in blood glucose and subsequent insulin secretion, but fat consumption has no major effect on either. If hyperinsulinemia is directly affected by nutrient intake, then it could be argued that these blood markers could be controlled by the conscious control of food choices. Of further note, the American Diabetes Association, ADA, recommends a goal of an HbA1c less than 7%, and the American College of Endocrinology sets a target level of 6.5%, even though few patients ever obtain that goal. Thus, Brownlee et al. Argued that patients should increase efforts to minimize glycemic variability since it can reduce risks of diabetic complications, independent of HbA1c. The direct study by Lean et al. Found that weight loss alone could result in almost 46% of patients achieving diabetes remission at 12 months. Yet, this does not address the issue of diabetic patients who are not overweight. Thus, many scientists are now examining the potential benefits related to diabetes and improved blood markers that can result from eating a ketogenic diet. Although no professional organization in endocrinology or diabetology has focused on the rational use of ketogenic diet for either diabetes or obesity conditions, Kulra et al. Argues nutrition should be considered as an integral part of metabolic management of diabetes, and the ketogenic diet should at least be offered as a treatment option. 6. The effect of the ketogenic diet on lipidology and cardiovascular risk. Cardiovascular disease, CVD, and its risk factors are a major health issue in industrialized nations. Moreover, large epidemiological studies are starting to show that CVD is becoming a larger problem in developing or low-income countries as well. There has been a long-standing viewpoint that a diet high in saturated fat is unhealthy and will eventually lead to cardiovascular disease. Many hypothesized that a diet rich in saturated fat will increase LDL, and thus more fat in the blood leads to fat deposits in the vessels, resulting in increased risk of cardiovascular disease. This idea was fortified by Ansel Keys in his 7-country study and eventually led to the diet heart hypothesis. Moreover, the United States accepted the idea proposed by Keyes and adopted the low-fat diet, LFD, as the optimal diet to fight the increasing levels of CVD in the US. Additionally, the mainstream view for decades was that high total cholesterol also leads to atherosclerosis and cardiovascular disease. As a result, the prescription of the LFD that consisted of 60% energy from carbohydrates became the standard of care for physicians starting in the 1980s. According to the 2015 Dietary Guidelines for Americans, people are still recommended to consume a diet that limits saturated fat intake to less than 10%, with some organizations placing even stricter limitations and advising around 7%. However, randomized controlled trials have started to question the validity that saturated fat intake and a single blood marker, LDL, can accurately predict risk. Many scientists now argue for the need to analyze specifically how different types of macronutrients that replace saturated fat in the diet are impacting risk. It is also important to consider the data regarding LDL as the single biomarker chosen to monitor and determine cardiovascular risk. 7. The effect of the ketogenic diet on cancer. Cancer currently remains the second leading cause of death, 22%, in the United States and is second only to heart disease. Typically, cancer occurs in adults because of multiple mutations in numerous genes that usually regulate cell growth and proliferation. Today, it is the accepted model that as many as 6 mutations need to occur to produce cancer, usually to oncogenes and tumor suppressor genes. Oncogenes are genes that regulate cellular pathways that can increase cellular growth, while tumor suppressor genes regulate pathways that inhibit abnormal cell growth. As the mutated cell population expands, it accrues the necessary changes to ignore growth control signals, avoid apoptosis, escape immune surveillance, and creates an environment to thrive, using mechanisms like angiogenesis and tolerance for anoxic environments, and eventually the capability to metastasize. These mutations can result from many causes, such as DNA replication errors, failed DNA repair mechanisms, mutagen exposures, or increased reactive oxygen species. Consequently, preventative mechanisms that could lower cancer incidence would be related to reducing these external causes or activating internal pathways to reduce cellular error. Additionally, epidemiologic evidence linking obesity to elevated cancer incidence found that 14% and 20% of all cancer deaths in men and women, respectively, are due to being overweight and obese. As a result, the annual report to the nation on cancer emphasized the increasing contribution of obesity on cancer incidence. One mechanism believed to contribute to obesity's role in cancer is the increase in adipocytes in the body, which can increase circulating levels of insulin and insulin growth factor 1, IGF-1, hormones. These hormones bind receptors in many cell types and activate P13K-AKT signaling pathways that increase cell survival and upregulate transcription factors that promote cell proliferation. Both hormones also increase glucose uptake into cells, resulting in increased energy molecules being available for cell growth. Insulin is an anabolic hormone that promotes glucose uptake into cells, reduces the release of fatty acids from adipocytes, prevents ketone production in the liver, and stimulates fat and glycogen storage. Additionally, many recent publications support the idea that prolonged, increased levels of serum insulin is likely to promote cancer growth. It's a valuable investment that you have ever made in your life. Get your 60-day keto diet plan today. Click the link in the description to start right now. If you like this video, make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel right now. Just click on the subscribe button below this video, and if you have any question, please go ahead, let me know by leaving a comment below right now.